June 12, 2026. Moving Up Ceremony. The moving up ceremony was only a few hours away, and the whole building buzzed with that strange mix of excitement and exhaustion that always came at the end of the year. Tonight would be the last time the students walked the halls as fifth graders, and the staff was determined to make the celebration feel special, even if they were running on fumes. Before any of that could happen, though, there was still one final staff meeting standing between them and the finish line. Don's office looked like the inside of a copier that had exploded. Papers were spread on his desk in uneven stacks, half sorted, half forgotten, and entirely stressing him out. He stood over them with a pen in his hand and a crease between his eyebrows, flipping through his personal notes for the staff meeting, as if they might magically rearrange themselves into something coherent. Liz and Melissa were doing the scrambling for him, restapling packets, crossing out lines he didn't need, and whisper arguing about whether he should open with a field day recap or the ice cream social. Melissa kept trying to reorganize the agenda, and Liz kept trying to get him to breathe.
"Don, you don't need all of this," Liz murmured, pulling out a duplicate sheet out of his hand. "I do," he insisted, even though he absolutely didn't. "You don't," Melissa echoed, sliding another page out from under his elbow. Outside the office, classroom doors were propped open, teachers drifting in and out as they cleaned, packed, and reset their rooms for the last time this year. Everyone knew they were supposed to go home after the meeting, but right now, no one was thinking about celebration. They just wanted the meeting over. "Teachers and staff, please report to the library for our meeting. We'll begin in a few minutes." Don hung up the phone. A few teachers groaned audibly from their rooms. Others murmured something under their breath, grabbed their coffee mugs, and started the slow, reluctant migration toward the library. Teachers sat scattered across tables, slumped in chairs, coffee mugs in hand, looking like they'd been summoned to jury duty. 1 p.m. Meeting begins. Don cleared his throat, trying to sound upbeat. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming in after dismissal. I know it's been a long day." A few polite nods and blank stares. He pressed on. "I promise I'll keep this as efficient as possible." Tanya murmured, "We'll see." Melissa shot her a look. Don set his papers down, squared them unnecessarily, and continued. "All right, first up, field day." A collective groan rolled through the room like a slow wave. "Overall," Don said, "field day was a huge success. The kids had a great time. Families had nothing but positive things to say. The events ran smoothly, and honestly, you all did a fantastic job out there." The teachers perked up a little, enough to show that they appreciated the acknowledgement. "But," he added, and the room immediately deflated again, "I do want to address something that came up." He scanned the room, then landed squarely on Michelle. "Some of the tone used with students during the events was harsher than necessary." Michelle blinked, slow and unimpressed. "Are we doing this right now?" "Yes," Don said. "We are." Carole whispered, "Oh boy." Craig rubbed his forehead. "Don, it's June." "I'm aware," Don replied, patience already thinning. "But yelling at students during the frisbee relay wasn't appropriate." Michelle crossed her arms. "I wasn't yelling. I was projecting." Hillary snorted. Tanya looked away to hide a smile. Susan stared at the ceiling like she was praying for strength. Don's jaw tightened. "Michelle, I was standing 10 feet away." Michelle shrugged. "Then you heard me projecting." Carla leaned forward. "Honestly, Don, everyone was yelling. It's field day. It's loud." "Most of you were redirecting," Don countered. "Encouraging, managing. Michelle was projecting," Michelle repeated, deadpan. Melissa pinched the bridge of her nose. Don exhaled sharply. "Look, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. I'm asking for professionalism, especially at public events." Michelle rolled her eyes. "Fine. Noted." "It needs to be more than noted," Don said, voice tightening. "It needs to change." "All right," he said, flipping to the next page with a little too much force. "Next thing." Craig murmured, "Thank God." Don ignored him. "We have reminders for the last day of school, the teacher ice cream social, and testing prep." "Please," Tanya said, "keep this short." Don straightened his papers. "I want to go over reminders for the last day of school next week." Craig groaned. "Don, that's next Friday." "Yes," Don replied, "which is why I'm reminding you now." Carla murmured, "We don't even know what day it is today." Dawn pressed on. Next Friday is an early dismissal at 11:30 a.m. Please make sure your students are packed up before lunch. Dawn continued on, ignoring the groans. Cumulative folders need to be completed and turned in by noon on the last day. Michelle scoffed. We're talking about next week. Why are we talking about next week? Because, Dawn said, patience thinning. If I don't say it now, half of you will forget. Carla raised her hand halfway. Can we turn them in after the ceremony tonight? No, Dawn said immediately. They're not due tonight. I'm tired of the complaining and silly questions. You should all know by now what is expected by you. I'm just reminding everyone ahead of time so I don't have to write an email. Melissa whispered. Dawn, breathe. Michelle raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. We're asking questions because you're talking about things that aren't happening until next Friday. Michelle, Dawn said sharply, these routines matter whether you like it or not. They help us close the year smoothly. Maintenance do their job, and they prevent me from chasing down materials in July. Cara murmured. You love chasing us down. Cara, enough. Dawn shook his head. She held up her hands. Just stating facts. Dawn strained his papers, unnecessarily aggressive. I want to remind everyone that end-of-year routines are important and need to be followed. He took a long breath. We have 3 major expectations, he continued, holding up 3 fingers like he was teaching kindergarten. First one is classroom closeout. Please make sure your rooms are fully cleaned and prepared for summer. Dawn pressed on. 2. Prepare your classrooms for summer cleaning and maintenance. That means furniture stacked, materials boxed, personal items removed, and anything fragile stored properly. Craig groaned. Dawn, half my furniture is already stacked. My kids have been sitting on the floor. Then you're ahead of schedule. Congratulations, Dawn said, not even pretending to joke. Michelle murmured. He says that like it's a reward. Liz shot her a look. And 3, Dawn continued, checkout sheets. That includes returning all library books, submitting grading records, and making sure your cumulative folders are complete. Next, Dawn said, flipping the page. The teacher celebration and ice cream social will be next Friday at 12:15 p.m. in the courtyard. The reaction from the teachers was instant. Carla sat up straighter. With the toppings bar? And the music? Hillary gasped. And the PTO gift bags? Michelle even uncrossed her arms. Are we getting the good ice cream this year, not the weird low-fat stuff? Dawn blinked, thrown off by the sudden enthusiasm. Yes. The PTO ordered the premium cartons. A cheer rippled across the room. Liz grinned. Oh, thank God. Craig pointed at Dawn. You should have led with this. I was trying to go in order, Dawn said, mildly offended. Tanya waved him off. Order doesn't matter. Ice cream matters. Even Michelle cracked a smile. Okay, fine. I'll be there. Dawn exhaled. Good. I'm glad we're all on the same page. Cara leaned forward, smiling. Dawn, she said, I just want to say, it's been at least 5 years since we've had a real teacher celebration, let alone an ice cream social. So, thank you. We really appreciate this. Dawn blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity. Oh, well, you all deserve it. Cara nodded. We do. And it means a lot that you're doing this. Dawn shifted his papers, which only made the staff stare. I know the past 2 years under my leadership have been an adjustment, he said, choosing his words carefully. A lot changed. Expectations changed. Routines changed. And you've all worked incredibly hard to keep up. The teachers exchanged looks, surprised, touched, and a little emotional. So, Dawn continued, I wanted to end the year on a good note. Something fun. Something that's just for you. Cara smiled wider. Well, mission accomplished. Dawn hesitated, then added, and it's also a thank you gift for inviting me to all your special events this year. Cara's eyebrows lifted. She had never considered her parties as events until Dawn said something. My events? Yes, Dawn said, clearing his throat. Your parties, your dinners, your gatherings. You didn't have to include me, but you did. And it meant a lot. Liz nudged Melissa, whispering, He's being sentimental. Melissa whispered back, Don't scare him. Let him finish. Cara softened. Dawn, you're a part of this group. Of course I want to include you, even though you're my boss. It doesn't change our friendship outside of work. Carla chimed in. Till death or retirement. Don rolled his eyes at Carla's comment, but he was smiling. Don flipped to the last page, much calmer now. Lastly, testing materials for next year need to be picked up before you leave next Friday. Instead of groaning, the teachers just nodded. Craig shrugged. Yeah, that's fine. Tanya said, As long as there's ice cream, I'll do anything. Michelle smirked. I'll pick up the testing bins if I get the chocolate fudge. Don stared at them, baffled. This is all it takes? With the room still buzzing from the celebration news, Don strained his papers and cleared his throat. Now that everyone's in a good mood, let's go over the moving up ceremony. There are a few changes this year, so I need everyone to listen carefully. Don continued. First, the ceremony will start promptly at 6 p.m. We need all staff back in the building by 5:30, dressed and ready. Second, we're changing the student entrance. Instead of coming in from the back hallway, they'll be lining up in the art wing and entering through the center stage. Carla perked up. Ooh, dramatic. It'll look cleaner, Don said, and it'll help with crowd flow. Michelle raised her hand. So we're not doing the side door shuffle this year? No, Don said. No more side door shuffle. Third, he continued, we're adjusting the seating. Teachers will sit with their classes instead of on the stage. Liz nodded. That'll help with the behavior. And photos. Exactly, Don said. Parents want to see their kid with their teachers. This makes it easier. He paused, letting them absorb it. Fourth, the PTO will have a dedicated recognition segment this year. They'll be presenting community awards and acknowledging volunteers. Cara smiled. They've been wanting that for years. Which is why everyone is invited tonight. I want to open the ceremony to all teachers, even if their classes are not graduating. Don smiled. He moves on, adjusting his stance. Here's the general order, Don said, holding up the agenda. We'll have the opening remarks speech, which will be done by yours truly, he bowed. Melissa will also give a short speech. Pledge and music led by Mr. Jennings. The 5th grade teachers will lead the student awards. Carla and Carole will take the stage for community recognition, and then we'll present the student procession and certificates. Finally, we'll have our closing remarks, which will include a slideshow presentation with photos from the year. We'll have reception in the courtyard where families will be picking up their students. And the evening will end shortly after 9 p.m., or even earlier if we're ahead of schedule, Don said proudly. The teachers cheered in response. Don continued on. If you would like to give a speech tonight, please make sure you have a printed copy of your script. Let me know ahead of time so I can set the stage. This sounds so organized, Cara commented. I'm proud of you. Everything should go as planned. There will be appetizers, light refreshments, and cookies in the cafeteria for teachers and parents only. Please refrain from giving your students any food before the awards ceremony. I don't want to see stains or messes, Don applied firmly. The room laughed, warm, relaxed, and finally on Don's side. Don closed his folder gently this time. All right, that's everything. Thank you for all your hard work. Let's make tonight special for the kids. Chairs scraped, and teachers started filing toward the door in a cheerful, buzzing cluster. Michelle, Don said, his voice cutting through the movement. She stopped mid-step. A few teachers glanced back, eyebrows raised. Don continued, calm but firm. Can you stay behind for a moment? I need to speak with you. Michelle blinked, surprised, but nodded slowly. She stayed where she was, arms loosely crossed, expecting a lecture. Don waited until the door shut and the hallway noise faded. Don't worry, he said. You're not in trouble. Michelle raised an eyebrow. Okay, then what's up? Don shifted his folder, suddenly looking more human than principal. I wanted to ask you something. She blinked, surprised by the gentleness. I know this year marks 30 years of teaching for you, he said calmly. Michelle's expression flickered. Yeah, it does. Don nodded. And because of that, I was wondering if you'd be willing to give a small speech at the graduation ceremony tonight. Michelle froze. Me? Yes, Don said. You. He continued before she could protest. It doesn't have to be long, just something heartfelt. A moment. A reflection. Whatever feels right to you. Michelle swallowed. Don, I don't want it to seem like I'm on my way out. It won't, Don said immediately. That's not the point. He stepped a little closer, voice low and steady. I don't want it to be sappy. I want it to be memorable. You've been here 30 years. You've shaped this school. You've shaped generations of kids, and I think the community deserves to hear from you. Michelle looked down, blinking fast. Wow, she said quietly. I wasn't expecting that. I know, Dawn replied, but you're the right person for it. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. Dawn let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Thank you. Michelle smirked. Don't make me regret it. He smirked back. I won't. Michelle slipped out of the library after Dawn dismissed her, still processing the fact that she'd be speaking tonight. The hallway outside was already alive with the familiar end-of-year buzz. Teachers gathering their things, signing out, and mentally shifting into celebration mode. Dawn stepped out of the library last, closing the door behind him with a tired but satisfied sigh. For once, the staff wasn't annoyed with him after the meeting. They were energized, laughing, and actually looking forward to the night. He watched them scatter down the hallway, calling out, Everyone, please be back by 5:30, dressed and ready. A chorus of, Yes, Dawn, echoed back. The parking lot filled with the sounds of engines starting, and teachers shouting last-minute reminders across the rows. And just like that, the building emptied, waiting for the evening celebration. 5 p.m. Dawn, Liz, Melissa, and Margaret set the stage. The custodians had transformed the cafeteria into a small auditorium. Rows of chairs, a center aisle, and a podium draped in gold and maroon. The stage had navy curtains and white bright lights. The PTO had already placed floral arrangements at the corners of the stage. Simple but elegant. Dawn arrived right at 5 p.m., nice and early. He was carrying a folder thick with notes when he headed up behind the stage. Liz and Melissa followed him in, both dressed up and looking more awake than they had all day. Margaret Jones was already there, adjusting the microphone height with the precision of someone who has done this many times before. Testing, she said into the mic. Okay, Dawn, you're good. Dawn stepped up, tapped the mic once, and nodded. Perfect. Thank you, Margaret. Liz smoothed the tablecloth on the awards table. Certificates are alphabetized. PTO gift bags are lined up. Melissa checked the seating chart taped to the wall. And the 5th grade section is front and center, as it should be. Parents are going to love this. Dawn exhaled. All right, we're in great shape. By 5:30 p.m., the cafeteria was buzzing. Teachers filtered in, dressed up, refreshed. Parents arrived early, filling the first few rows on the right side, chatting, taking pictures of the stage, saving seats with jackets and purses. The PTO hovered near the gift table, proud of their setup. Custodians made last-minute adjustments to the chairs. The music teacher tuned the keyboard in the corner. The 5th grade teachers entered together, and parents immediately perked up, waving, whispering, pointing them out to their kids. Michelle scanned the room, taking in the decorations and the energy. Cara nudged her. You ready? Michelle inhaled. As I'll ever be. Tanya grinned. You're gonna crush it. 6 p.m. Ceremony begins. The lights dimmed softly as Dawn approached the podium, excitement buzzing under his calm exterior. The room settled, parents leaning forward, teachers straining in their seats. Liz and Melissa stood off to the side, papers in hand, ready to assist. Dawn looked out at the crowd, and for a moment, he let himself feel the weight of it. He immediately smiled. Good evening, everyone, he began. Welcome to our 5th grade moving up ceremony. The room erupted in applause, and the night officially began. Dawn rested his hands on the podium, taking in the crowd who had just returned looking refreshed and proud. Margaret worked the lights from backstage, adjusting the spotlight as Dawn began. Transitioning into my 2nd year as principal has been a journey, he said. It hasn't always been easy. Change never is. But the students and the teachers have made every challenge worthwhile. He glanced toward the 5th grade section. 4 rows of excited, fidgeting kids, with Tanya and Cara sitting at the sidelines, keeping them in line with gentle looks and whispered reminders. This year, our school has gone through a lot of changes, Dawn continued. New routines, new expectations, new systems. And I'll be honest, leadership training has pushed me harder than I expected. It forced me to rethink how I lead, how I communicate, and how I support the people in the building. At the far end of the cafeteria, the PTO stood behind their decorated table, listening proudly. But every step of the way, Dawn said, voice warming. Our staff showed resilience. Our students showed heart. And together we built something stronger than what we started with. Backstage, Michelle paced slowly, rehearsing her speech under her breath, clutching her note cards. She paused when she heard Dawn's tone shift and allowed herself a small, private smile. A district representative had slipped in quietly, taking a seat along the wall.
Don blinked, surprised, but kept going. "I'm grateful for this community," he said, "and I'm honored to celebrate these incredible students tonight." The rep gave a polite nod. Don nodded back. He nodded toward the music teacher, signaling the next cue. "Let's begin." Don stepped aside as the music teacher approached the mic. Everyone stood up. The pledge was recited in a proud, slightly chaotic chorus, as always. Then the 5th grade chorus performed their song, shaky at first, then stronger, filling the cafeteria with that earnest and perfect beauty only elementary school performances have. As the music teacher stepped away, Don returned to the podium. "Thank you," he said. "Now, before we move into our student awards, we have a very special moment of recognition." He glanced toward the wings, where Michelle stood just out of sight. "This year marks an extraordinary milestone for one of our teachers. Someone who has dedicated 3 decades to this school, to this community, and to generations of students." Parents murmured. Teachers straightened. Cara nudged Tanya, whispering, "Here we go." Don smiled toward the backstage entrance. "It is my honor to invite Michelle Parker to the stage." A round of cheers and applause filled the room. Michelle inhaled, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward. Michelle stepped up to the podium and the applause swelled around her. She waited for it to settle before leaning toward the mic. "Good evening, everyone." Tanya gave her a discreet thumbs up from the sidelines. "My name is Michelle Parker, and I've been teaching at South Street for 30 years, which means I've survived more field days, fire drills, and spirit weeks than I care to count." Dawn cracked a smile from the side of the stage. "And yet, every year, I'm reminded why I stay. Students like you. You all have cracked me up, made me proud, and sure, sometimes I've wondered what I got myself into. But more than anything, I've watched you grow into kind, determined people. You figured out how to work as a team, speak up for yourselves, and pick yourselves up when things went sideways." She glanced toward her class, the front row, and several kids beamed back at her. "To the families, thank you for being right there with us. And to my coworkers, you all make surviving the wild ride of school life actually possible." Melissa whispered, "She's killing it." "But mostly, to my students, hang on to your curiosity, hold on to your humor, don't lose your big hearts, and seriously, keep turning in your assignments on time. Trust me, your future teachers will thank you for it." Michelle let the moment breathe and then smiled. "Congratulations, class of 2026. You made it." The cafeteria exploded into applause. Parents standing, kids cheering, teachers clapping like they were at a Broadway show. Michelle stepped back from the podium, cheeks flushed, accepting the applause with a small, grateful nod before returning to her seat on the stage.